Welcome back to Rise and Shine viewers. Welcome back to Rise and Shine viewers. On set with me this morning is Mr. Martin George, well-known face on Tobago Channel 5, attorney at law. You know, he always comes and gives us a good perspective of the topics of the day, you know, of how things should go. So we thank Mr. George, you know, for the legal advice, you know, he gives the public on Tobago Channel 5. Mr. George, good morning. And
good morning to you, and it's a pleasure as always to be here, and good morning Tobago, and to all the viewers in the wider diaspora, the persons who follow this program. I think you all need to make arrangements for this program to be carried on the Trinidad channels. There are lots of Tobagonians in Trinidad who would love to follow this program, you know, and follow your Channel 5 program. And so that's something to consider, to make sure that you have arrangements with all the carriers, the cable carriers in Trinidad, that they would carry the program so that people can follow it also.
Very well, so take your advice and carry to the quarters that it's supposed to be dealt with. Okay. But that's very good advice. Yeah. Okay? I see you this morning dressed in your
yes,
uniform?
Yeah. yes, my work suit.
All right. Yes. Right. So this morning we're talking about the Milshove project down at Milford Chauvin, and we're also talking about the boat arrangement.
Yes.
Right. Quite recently, the courts had made an interpretation of the law relating to the responsibilities of the Tobago House of Assembly and those of the central government, right, in terms of the interpretation of the House of Assembly Act.
Yes.
Where it concerns gathering of funds or money to do things in Tobago.
Right.
And there's where Milshove comes in this morning. Tell us, Mr. George, tell us about the ruling first, you know, outline for the public what it is about.
Last week, before Justice Ronnie Budu Singh, he gave his decision in the matter which had been brought by the Attorney General in relation to the Milshove Bolt arrangement and the financing package which had been constructed around that deal. Now, the purpose of the litigation was for the court to interpret. So in other words, whereas originally the action had been brought in the nature, in a very confrontational nature, and I think it was in the heat of some political campaign, you know, that this action was brought. So therefore, there was an attempt, I think, to stop the project and, you know, to get orders from the court in that regard. The matter was later refined because as a result of the application to have the project stopped, you then had the financiers having to come in. FCB was brought into the matter, you know, I think Beaver Construction, who were the persons who were responsible for doing the actual construction, they were brought into the matter because they were saying, well, look, if the project is stopped, we would suffer losses. FCB was saying, as the financiers, we would be exposed. So therefore, the matter got very convoluted at that stage. I think the Minister of Finance made a very timely and appropriate intervention, Mr. Larry Hawaii, because basically he said, listen, when I look at it, when I assess everything, if I try to go ahead with a stop order, basically, then the losses on all sides may be too much to be practical. So therefore, that aspect of the case was abandoned and it proceeded on a much more harmonious note for an interpretation by the courts as to the respective arrangements. And I want us to understand this as Tobagonians and as Trinbagonians. The whole purpose of having interpretation actions such as this is so that we can clarify the way forward. Because at the end of the day, you have the Tobago House of Assembly, which in essence is of the nature of, say, for instance, a borough corporation. But in actuality, it is not. It has tremendously much more powers, authority, autonomy than a borough corporation. So therefore, if you consider, like, for instance, Point Fortin Borough Corporation or Superior Borough Corporation, you know, the basic idea is the same. However, because of Tobago's unique position and its relationship to Trinidad, the powers of the Assembly are much wider and more diverse. So what we have seen over the years, and of course the politicians, they twist it and turn it for each of their own respective ends and means. But you see, we the public need to understand, forget all the hype and the hubris of the politicians, because they all have their agendas. In other words, they know that, look, they want to make their party look good and make the other side look bad. That's their job. Fine. Let's get to the core. Let's cut to the chase so that the man in the street can understand what really happened. In that judgment, Justice Budu Singh, I think he went through a very clear, detailed reasoning. And what he said is, listen, in terms of the powers of the Tobago House of Assembly as contained in the 5th schedule under the THA Act as amended, the 1996 amended Act, he says, under those powers which are set out there in the 5th schedule, it seems clear to him that the THA does have the power to enter into financing arrangements such as a bolt type arrangement. So in other words, he's saying that under the provision which gives you authority to deal with finance, because if you recall, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, under the 5th schedule, there are 31 specific areas which the THA is given authority to deal with. And there's a 32nd provision which says any other matters. So in other words, you have a wide range of things: land, marine resources, lots of things, agriculture, fisheries, several things are itemized and enumerated. And among those things, you have finance. So he says that, look, basically when one looks at it, under the provisions of the legislation, and even when you take into account Section 75 of the Constitution, which deals with the overriding power of the cabinet, okay, because that comes into play, because you have to look at the issue of, even though the THA may have these powers, can they exercise it independently or without the blessings or the approval of the Minister of Finance? So you juxtapose the provisions of Section 75(1) of the Constitution, which deals with the overriding power and control of the cabinet over the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. You look at the provisions of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, you look at the provisions of the 5th schedule, and you analyze to make sense of where exactly do the real powers of the THA lie. And that's what it is about, because essentially, and I want Tobagonians to understand this comes down to a question of a power struggle. In other words, you've constantly had that friction between central government and the Tobago House of Assembly as to who controls what, who controls turf. And you see it played out even in the most, superficial and simplistic ways, such as, the opening of a building, who is invited. If it comes through the Ministry of Tobago Development, then they think, well, okay, they must have all the government ministers there, and they sideline the people from the THA, or they put them to sit at the back, and then, the THA officials, they feel, well, they're slighted, so therefore they're not attending, or they leave early, or they walk out, and this is the kind of petty foolishness that Tobagonians have been subjected to over the years. And it's time for us as the people, we the common man, we need to stand up and say, hey, listen, you could carry on your fight and your folly, but listen, we need to deal with the bread and butter issues. We need to know, say for instance, even in that Milshirv project, if you have a $320 million project, because that's really the value of the project. If you have a $320 million project taking place in Tobago, who are the main contractors? Are there Tobagonians on board in terms of the persons who would be benefiting directly from this project? Or is it that you're going to have contractors only from Trinidad coming across and making all the millions, while Tobagonians, we just sit back and watch our money being spent, given to others who pack up suitcases full of money and fly back to Trinidad? These are the things that the public needs to know. In other words, if you have Tobago contractors who are given major segments or packages in the job, and they employ Tobagonians who can come in there as masons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, subcontractors under the main contractor, who could then, say, well, okay, look, I have this package for ironmongery, I have this package for woodworks, that kind of thing. So therefore, we can see direct benefit coming to Tobagonians. That's what we need to ask. And these are the questions we need to put to the politicians, and don't get caught up in their tit for tat. Because that's all they're doing. It's just a tit for tat, I won this round, you win next round. And look, let them take that and they carry that wherever. Let us ask them the relevant questions. You ask yourself, even the goat race facility, which was built, at Buku for $120 million reputedly, who was the contractor on that? Was it a Tobagonian? I do not think so. And these are the questions. So in other words, $120 million being spent. Are you telling me that no Tobago contractor can build a goat race facility? Come on. We are the kings of goat racing here in Tobago, and we cannot even build our own facility. So you ask the politicians these questions. Ask them, why is the money being spent that way? Why is it being, basically, let me tell you, the public in Tobago has been fooled for too long, because you know what? It's simply a recycling plant, like a washing machine. Okay? You put it on the spin cycle. You get billions of dollars from Trinidad each year. It filters through the assembly, and then the assembly chooses all these people from Trinidad as the big contractors and sends the money right back down to Trinidad. So the cycle is there going over and over, and Tobagonians sit by and not realize what is happening. If that money, every year your budget is $3 billion, where's the $3 billion? Look around. I ask Tobagonians, you walk through Scarborough. Walk through Scarborough. Look at the dilapidated state of it. Okay. Look at how it's, run down. Can you see evidence of your $3 billion every year? It's not there. It keeps cycling and going somewhere else.
Right. Okay, Mr. George. I see you.
I'm passionate. I'm passionate about Tobago.
Let's use that word. Passionate. Very passionate about Tobago. But let's talk about the contractors, because there are other services as well in the THA that are contracted, or not only the boat arrangement. Very simple things that Tobagonian contractors Tobago can produce.
Yes.
But they are being sent to Trinidad. And you talk to the politicians, or you talk to people. These people, they will tell you that it's cheaper down there, comparing prices and comparing what it may be 5% cheaper when you finish the building, and they are looking at the bottom line.
Okay, and that's a valid point. And I would say this to the Tobagonian businessmen, the Tobagonian entrepreneurs, the young aspiring persons who want to provide a service. I would say you need to step up your game. In other words, I would say in any circumstance, I would give a young Tobago business person the contract, but I'm not giving it to you as a favor. I'm giving it to you because I expect you to deliver the highest quality and standard acceptable to international levels. If you are not able to deliver that, then I can't take the public's money and put it in your hands. So therefore, we need to balance it, and that's a valid point. If that's a point that the assembly is making, then that's a valid point. But then they need to also have the programs to educate, uplift, develop, inspire these young business persons so they can understand what it is to bring their businesses, bring their standards up to international quality. Because you see, if we're talking about improving Tobago, we're talking about building human resource and technical. Invest in the human capital and raise the standard and level. So in other words, we have to tell ourselves, despite the fact that Tobago is known to be a nice, quiet, laid-back place, when it comes to quality and standards, we must excel. We must excel in terms of our food service. We must excel in terms of our beverage service. We must excel in our hospitality. Because that's an area I could tell you I'm particularly concerned about in Tobago. We do not seem to understand the basics of what hospitality is about. These are things that we must get right. You can't talk. I heard the secretary talking about flying to here and there, and she had such wonderful meetings and a whole delegation. We know how it goes. A plane load goes down, they have a great time, and they come back and say, oh yes, we went to Latin America, we went Colombia, we went Mexico, we are selling Tobago. At the end of the day, that means nothing if the basic service that the visitor gets is subpar, overpriced, and they feel that they're being robbed. Nobody will want to come back to Tobago if that's the case. Okay, Mr. George, let's take a break now. We'll take a break and we return with Mr. Martin George talking about good governance this morning, Milshove and the board project. We'll go for a break and return to you in a moment.
Take advantage, live the big dream. Take advantage, orange and green. Take advantage, advantage. Flippy mobile, advantage. Flippy mobile, advantage. Flippy mobile, advantage. 10 trips to Brazil, all the networks have none. Advantage. We go in Brazil. Be mobile.
another Division in Motion brought to you by the Division of Health and Social Services, Wednesdays 8 to 9 p.m. It's your opportunity to get familiar with this division and find out what they do. The Division of Health and Social Services, a division in motion, right here on Tobago Channel 5.
In News Tonight. By downloading the TML Virtual Vision app today.
Be viewing Tobago Channel 5 every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. and Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. for the airing of the message brought to you by the Assemblies of Yahweh.
Till next week at the same time on the same station, this has been Elder Jacob O. Meyer saying, may Yahweh bless you abundantly.
Trendy Concepts has you covered this Easter with new arrivals of dresses, shoes, and handbags in time for jazz, weddings, or that special occasion. A new line of fashion jewelry awaits you. Visit us this Easter and capitalize on our special discounted prices. Trendy Concepts, Uptown, Corner Main and Robinson Street, Scarborough. Call us today, 635-1253.
This information comes to you courtesy the Consumer Affairs Unit.
Consumer Tips.
I am an assertive consumer. I check for expiry dates, best before dates, on or before dates, best by dates, and used by dates. This information comes to you courtesy the Consumer Affairs Unit in the Division of Finance and Enterprise Development. Telephone number 639-6556.
Attention all Trico Cable TV customers in the surrounding areas of Bagatelle, Friendsfield, Calder Hall Road, Bacalet Street, Gardenside Street to the junction of Main and Calder Hall Road. It's your time now. Trico would be switching you to digital cable TV on Monday, 2nd June at 8:30 a.m. Come into any of our offices at E-Tech Mall, Francis Hill, or Morset Plaza today to regularize your account as distribution of digital cable boxes begins on 12 May 2014. Remember, if you have one TV, you need one box. 2 TVs, you need 2 boxes. 3 TVs, you need 3 boxes. Come into Trico and regularize your account today. Experience the future in cable TV technology with Trico Industries Limited.
Welcome back to Rise and Shine viewers. We're talking this morning about the Milshove and Milshove project and the bold arrangement. And with me is Mr. Martin George, attorney at law, well-known face on Tobago and in Trinidad. Right, Mr. George, just before I want us to move on to the Central Tenants Board Act, and how it affects the ruling. But before we go on to that, I just wanted to say something about hospitality and what it means. In terms of us a tourism destination, the initiatives of the tourism secretary and the man in the street in Tobago also included the visitors who would be here.
Okay, all right. I would start off by saying something which I know may not sit well with many persons in authority in Tobago. Tobago is not a tourism destination. And I make no apologies for saying that. We are a place where tourists sometimes come but we haven't even begun to understand what it is to create a tourism destination. Tobago is not anywhere near there. You look around at other Caribbean countries, you look at Barbados, you look, St. Lucia is light years ahead of Tobago when it comes to tourism. You look at even little places like St. Kitts. You know, you go down in the area down by where the Marriott Hotel is down there. It's such a lovely little setting down there. You know, you go to St. Martin, where they understand what tourism is about and what creating a tourism destination is. Tobago is nowhere near there, and we need to stop kidding ourselves. We need to stop fooling ourselves. We need to stop allowing the persons who are supposed to be in charge of tourism to simply ensure that they get foreign trips. You know, they go, you know, New York, they go Miami, and they say, you know, they're going to this convention and that convention, and they're supposed to be, you know, promoting Tobago. We need to put a stop to that. We need to get to the basics. If you do not have good service, we have a hospitality training institute here in Tobago, and I know they are trying their best in terms of trying to educate and elevate the standard of service in Tobago. But trust me, if the leaders do not make that a priority, then you cannot even begin to talk about having a tourism destination. People need to come to a place where good service is a minimum. It's expected. Good quality treatment at all your spots, everywhere that people go. That's what a visitor expects, because let me tell you, the other countries are offering that, and if persons are not getting that here in Tobago, they will go elsewhere.
But don't forget the mantra: clean, green, safe, and serene.
Yes,
so,
yes, see, that's what we love to hold on to these cliches.
That would hinder, or that the mindset of that would assist in hindering Tobago, the tourism sector, from moving on, you know, to develop. Well, even some of the sites that that people
that's the point.
want to develop.
You see, the leaders need to be honest with the population and say, hey, listen, we are not up to standard. Let's accept that as the starting point. In other words, you must know where you are coming from before you can move forward to build. If you don't even accept where you are, then you can never know where you're going. So let's put the cards on the table and accept we are not a tourism destination. We would like to become a tourism destination, and then we look at the things which are needed. The first fundamental has to be your service. Then the next thing has to be, you have to have things which you can offer which are attractive to the visitors, whereby they will be inclined to spend their monies. You have to, let me tell you, the basic concept of tourism, and this is something all our tourism officials, and I'm talking even about the TDC. The TDC, I mean, I've described them as the tourism destruction company, because they're good at destroying tourism, okay? And I make no apologies for saying so again. They don't even understand what it is about. Tourism is, and I'll put it simply, this is a definition I have come up with, which I think applies across the board. Tourism is a way of pleasantly separating a visitor from his money in a way that he's happy to come back and do it all over again. So in other words, you give a visitor such a wonderful experience when he comes to your country. He would, you know, he would pay for this, he would buy this, he would, you know, because he's having such a great time. He would go back, he'll tell all his friends, he'll say, hey, listen, Tobago was fantastic, let's go back again. So in other words, that's the essence of it. You look around, when the cruise ships come into Scarborough, I feel sorry for those visitors. You know why? They are walking around like they're in amazement. Where's Scarborough? Where's the city? You know, what is there to buy? What is there to do? There's nowhere for them to spend their money. You know, instead we organize a proper cultural show of a high professional standard and charge the visitor for them to come in to a nice school auditorium where they can have a well professionally, you know, prepared show delivered of highest quality. No, what we do, we pay little local groups for them to come down by the dock and perform for free. So the tourists get this for free. Does that make any sense to anybody? Where would you get the money from the tourists? If you are saying that tourism is a way of generating revenue, then you have to provide means for the visitors to spend their money. You need to provide attractive things for them to be able to do that. You look at that whole stretch of the, you know, the port area by Scarborough. That whole area should be properly developed. When you land, say for instance in St. Kitts, you land where the cruise ships come in. and you have the area there by the port. You have all the nice bars, you have all the nice stores, everything well laid out. You know, they understand what this thing is about. We are light years behind everybody.
Okay, Mr. George, we'll have to bring you back to talk about
Sure.
specifically about tourism, but we want to move on to the Central Tenders Board.
Yes.
And, you know, what part it should play. We know the Central Tenders Board has a very important role.
Right.
In Trinidad
This
and Tobago.
actually is, unfortunately, the more important aspect of Justice Budu Singh's judgment. Now, as I say, for their own reasons, the politicians would trumpet different parts of the judgment and say, we have won a victory. That's not the case at all. In other words, the first part, the judge said, yes, the THA is empowered to enter into these bold type arrangements. But the second part, the sting in the tail, is where he said, however, the THA is subject to and must be circumscribed by the provisions of the Central Tenders Board Act. And the judge is quite correct when he says so. Because when you look at the Central Tenders Board Act, under the schedule which provides the list of the bodies which are subject to the Central Tenders Board Act, the Tobago House of Assembly is clearly set out there. When you look further into the Act, and you look at how it is governed, it says that when you have a situation where there is a project in excess of $1 million, then the Central Tenders Board Act must apply. So in other words, when you think of something like the Millshave project, which is, I say, in value around $320 million, then obviously, while you can enter into the bolt arrangement, you must do so by following the procedures in the Central Tenders Board Act. And the Central Tenders Board Act also prevents the breaking up into packages, because if you recall, what persons tried to do in the past is to break things up into packages. Right? You had, like, for instance, previous projects where they will say, well, this package, we bring it just under $1 million. So, you know, you try to develop $320 million packages just to ensure that you escape and no, they said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot be breaking things up into packages to say, well, look, you escape the provisions of the Central Tenders Board Act. So this Millshave project, this is one which squarely falls under the control of the Central Tenders Board Act. And what that means for Tobagonians, and it comes right back to the point I started on, you cannot then go with this sole selective tendering process. And that's the difficulty, you know. And I want Tobagonians to understand, this is all about dollars and cents. It's all about money. That's the bottom line. So in other words, who gets the money? And you look at the network, it's a very cozy relationship. Ask yourself, what are the relationships between the persons who first proposed this Millshave idea to the THA? Look at the players, see who they are. We need to understand these things. And then you look at the family connections. And it's all from Trinidad. Look at the family connections between that group and the group which controls the main contractor, Beaver Construction. We all know which group that is. So in other words, when you look at the connections, you realize it's himself to himself and back to himself. And the money is circulating in a nice, small, tight, cozy group. And $320 million of money, which could go towards developing Tobago, is now recycled, the same washing machine cycle I told you about, the same laundry cycle, and spinning its way right back to Trinidad. So when we fool ourselves and say, well, yes, we got so much money in the budget allocated to Tobago, what's the point if when we get the allocation, our officials, our THA officials are then just cycling that same money right back to the Trinidadian contractors? And when you use a sole selective tendering process, not only are you in breach of the Central Tenders Board Act, which gives you a limit of $1 million. So once you have a $320 million project, obviously you need to come to the Central Tenders Board, and that's the reason why. It's to prevent this type of nepotism and cronyism which can occur in those circumstances. So therefore they said, look, let the Central Tenders Board decide, let other persons bid. We have very good contractors in Tobago who could bid for packages, you know, a $15 million package, a $20 million package. They then would now employ the Tobagonians who are in their workforces and their work crews and say, well, look, all right, I'm giving you this package for electrical works, this package for ironmongery, this package for woodworks, this package for cabinetry, this package for outfitting and furniture. Come on, are you saying that we are not capable of doing that? Look at how many examples we have had of successful Tobagonian businessmen who have been able to scale the highest heights. You have Bob York, you have IT McLeod, you have so many persons. We have a former governor of the Central Bank, Victor Bruce. So we have persons who are much more than capable of understanding finance and business and being able to, you know, do the very best. So therefore, let's not belittle ourselves. Don't insult my intelligence and tell me that you must get contractors from Trinidad to come up and do these projects.
So, Mr. George, in the scheme of things and what you are saying, do you think an insertion should be made somewhere where the Tobago contractor is given priority? Let's say if you can't source the contractor into Tobago, all efforts fail to source a contractor in Tobago.
I'm not saying that, you know, you then exhibit bias in terms of, you know, trying to especially favor a Tobago contractor. All I'm saying is give them the equal opportunity. In other words, you can't tell me, well, boy, you're too small to get this big job. If I don't try and get the experience at handling a big job, how will I ever learn? In other words, you have me locked in a cycle, in the conundrum where you're saying, look, you can't get the work because you don't have experience. And if you don't have experience, you can't get the work. So where do you leave our contractors? How are we going to develop? How are we going to develop our tradesmen, our craftsmen? How are we going to develop if you don't provide them with the opportunities? Because you know what happens when you give these big contracts to the Trinidadian contractors? What they do, they bring up an entire workforce from Trinidad. I'm talking masons, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, even laborers. They bring up from Trinidad. So therefore you have a situation where Tobagonians are sitting down doing not one thing except getting a CPEP job, and then the THA rattles off statistics and says, oh, Tobago has little or no unemployment. Yes, because you give me a CPEP job. A CPEP job is where you are giving me a fish. You know what? I want to learn to fish. Let me cast my rod into the water. Let me be able to determine my destiny. And that's what the THA officials do not want Tobagonians to be able to do. Because you know what? You will get too big for your boots. You will become too independent. And therefore you will not need us. So we must keep you in subjugation. We must keep you in a state of dependency. So therefore you will not get the big contracts. Let us give it to Trinidadians who we have no fear of. But you, the persons who have to vote for us, we must keep you in a state where you need us every day. So therefore, when election time comes, you must give us your vote. We need to break free of these things. And I'm saying this applies to the politicians across the board. It's not one political party. Right. All of them are guilty of this culture of political subjugation, and you have too much of this occurring in Tobago, keeping us back and stymieing our development.
All right. Let's talk a little about the work ethics, work attitude about the average Tobagonian, you know, in terms of working on projects, long hours, you know.
Right. Very good idea. Very good point. Now, that's another thing. We need to also be honest with ourselves. In other words, we cannot on the one hand say, yes, we want to tender for the big jobs, tender for the big contracts, if we are not willing to do the work. And that ties into what I was saying earlier. In other words, Tobagonians have to realize that, look, if you want to play in the big leagues, you need to up your game. If you want to play test cricket, you want to go in the oval. That's where you want to be. True. But to be in the oval, you have to be of a certain standard. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to that discipline. Tobagonians have a long and rich history of being dedicated, hardworking, enterprising, entrepreneurial and successful people. But we have lost that because our culture has been destroyed by the CPEP and URP mentality. In other words, when you start giving an entire generation the idea that, look, you can get something for nothing, then they figure, well, why work hard? Why do I have to sacrifice and make the effort when I can sit at home and somebody is signing my name on a register at a CPEP ghost gang? I'm getting paid for doing nothing. So we need to break that culture, break that cycle. That whole CPEP URP idea, which has destroyed Trinidad, and it has then spiraled into the criminal activity, the gang activity, the killing people for contracts, the NHA scandal with, the painting contracts. All of that stemmed from that basic idea where you feed people the notion, the fantasy really, that they can get something for nothing. There's always a price to pay. And we as Tobagonians need to understand that. I'm not saying that the CPEP workers don't do a useful part of, the working society, but we must understand that that cannot be the aspiration for Tobagonians. I don't want to see that as the future for Tobagonians. Tobagonians must not be just maids and cleaners and gardeners. We must own the businesses and have maids and cleaners and gardeners working for us. That's where our vision needs to be. That's where we need to start focusing.
How can we convince the people in authority, the politicians, the CEOs in Tobago that this must be part of the building, development?
Well, you see, you see exactly like how we are doing this morning, where we are engaging the people in discussions, and that's what we need to do. We need to engage the people of Tobago in conversations. We need to have meaningful discussions so that people can begin to understand that, look, hey, where I am right now is not where I am always to be. I can be better, I can improve it, but you need to have that discussion to open the eyes of the public so they can have that vision. A people without a vision shall surely perish. And that's what our leaders don't want us to have. They don't want us to have. In other words, they want us to follow them like three blind mice all over the place. So it will end up being a case of the blind leading the blind. So we have to understand that programs such as this and public education discussions and seminars where people are able to explain free of the political bias, because that's what happens every time you have someone, they may have, they have a political spin because they for this party or for the other party, and the whole discussion gets skewed. You need to have independent persons. Dana Sital was a very strong independent thinker, very strong independent person who gave you her views. And that's what we need more of in Trinidad and Tobago. We need persons who are able to speak out, who are able to give their unbiased opinions for the benefit of the public. That's the most important thing. That's why I come and do these shows every morning when you ask me, because I think it's important for the public of Tobago to get a different impression, let them understand that, look, apart from the two political views, there's a third independent view which is for the benefit of the public. Okay,
well, that does it for this morning, Mr. George. Until the next morning, right? I will be talking to Mr. Martin George, a lawyer, attorney, about the Milshove project and the Central Terminals Board and the board arrangement. Mr. George, thank you very much this morning.
It's a pleasure as always.
All right, viewers, at this time we go to a break and we would have the Rise and Shine morning news coming up. So we go for a break and return to you in a moment.